So thanks for joining us for today's office hours on tapping Cloudflare for API security. I'm Michelle McLean with SALT, and I'm joined by Weston Ekman, Principal Security Engineer at SALT. Weston, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to talk with you guys today about how Cloudflare customers can sort of get double duty out of their Cloudflare deployment and use it in conjunction with SALT to get additional levels of API security in the infrastructure. We're super lucky to have Weston with us today. He's not only well steeped in solving API security challenges for our customers all the time, but he was a solutions engineer at Cloudflare in a past life. And so he really knows that platform well as well. So bringing them together, he can tell you a lot about how that unified world works and how that environment gets built out, how easy it is to make it go. So we have a lot of customers that are tying SALT into both the Cloudflare WAF and the Cloudflare CDN to augment their capabilities in the API security world. It is a different world. It's not just a regular application attack. These API attacks look a little different, feel a little different, and traditional approaches can't necessarily catch them. They weren't really built to catch them. So Weston, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. We're excited to hear this Better Together story, and let's dive in to understand what Cloudflare does and how SALT complements that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much, Michelle, for the intro. Very excited to speak with everybody today. Just looking at the attendee list, I see someone I actually recognize, Calvin. Big shout out to you. Thanks for joining. He was actually my manager when I left Cloudflare. Happy to have him here. I feel like I grew a lot because of him, so I appreciate you being here. I hope I can teach you something. And then one last thing, I think a nice little congratulations to Calvin because he just got the Manager of the Year over at Cloudflare. So awesome job, man. Oh, cool. So let's jump straight into it. We're here to talk today a little bit about API security, talk about Cloudflare, and then how it's combined with SALT security to fully complement and enhance your security posture. And before we talk directly about the API security piece, I want to talk a little bit about Cloudflare benefits. I'm still very much a huge fanboy of what Cloudflare offers, the type of features they have, right? I mean, 250 plus POPs, fast speeds, anycast technology, image optimization. So we're talking about a lot of reliability, we're talking about performance, and then lastly, that security aspect, a very effective WAF, DDoS protection, zero trust technology, certificate management, workers. I mean, honestly, the list goes on and on and on. The amount of features and products that Cloudflare offers at such success is incredible. And so one of the great things about Cloudflare to come to is that security aspect. It's when I left, I think it was about 10% of the internet was going through Cloudflare. I think, maybe come and text me later. I think it's at 12% now, just a ginormous amount of internet traffic going through Cloudflare. So because of that, they're able to parse out and start building these static policies to give that protection to their customers, right? The Cloudflare managed rule set is, on par with very few, right? Not many people can keep up with it. Giving these types of protection against XSS, SQL injection. I mean, this is a small list I showed here, but it's very, very big, right? Even like specific environments like Joomla or WordPress, right? And then protection for OWASP top 10, rate limiting, and then custom WAF rules that you can build out statically for your specific environment. So awesome list of features. And so as we kind of move forward and as we kind of see what the transition and the landscape has evolved, the attack vector has changed, just our environment in general has changed, right? Especially with APIs, we think about it just a few years ago, they used to be static, unchanging, not very many, right? We think of it as like a small village. But as technology grows, as technology evolves, we scale, we get bigger, right? And so APIs nowadays are dynamic and ever changing. It looks like a metropolitan, and you can get lost without some sort of GPS to find where you need to go. And so to keep up with that, right? Good security is rooted in deep context, right? And so with APIs, with how much they've grown and a sea of API calls and response, context is very hard to get because people are able to do these subtle manipulations and they're very easy to miss. So, I mean, you think of someone logging on to their account and they go in and change an account ID after being authorized and authenticated, right? And they change an account ID and they're able to get at someone else's account that's not associated to theirs, right? Seemingly that's, right, using the application as intended. So when we come up with that specific transaction, the WAF only sees that one single transaction in silo. It doesn't see everything else. And because it looks like it's using the applications as intended, it's going to let it through, right? Because it's not one of the static policies that's been built out in your firewall or WAF or whatever it might be. And then when we look at kind of other API security solutions, right, it's still a magnifying glass. It's showing more, right? It's giving you more context, but it's not enough context. Because realistically, what you ultimately need is the whole picture. I mean, I can't imagine going to a movie theater and just watching, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 10 minutes there, and it's all in jumbled order, right? I mean, I'm thinking of just like Inception. As confusing as the movie is, if it's built in all these different parts, I'm not going to get it. So with this wider lens, what we need is this duality. We need the cloud scale big data coupled with the mature ML AI algorithm. Because if we only have the cloud scale big data, we're going to have to be the ones that parse through it. And I'm going to tell you, I will never do that. That is too much data to fully go through. It's too many attributes. It's just, I'm getting stressed just thinking about having to do something like that, right? Now, when we couple that, if we have built out alerts or whatever, then we're going to get alert fatigue because it's going to do it all on every single anomaly, on every accident. We need something else to parse it through. Now, that's where the ML AI algorithm comes in. Now, if it's not mature and doesn't have the correct amount of data, it's not going to be able to process and spit out the correct information that you're looking for, ultimately. So we need the two together. So when we think about adding those two together, we have to consider, holistically, especially in e-commerce, because e-commerce, name of the game is speed, right? How can we do this without affecting our user experience, right? Without adding latency. And so going about it as a proxy, going about it as something that's inline is not the way to go, because in order to see the whole picture, that would add a lot of latency, that big data, right? And so how we come at it is that we sit out of band and we mirror all that API traffic, and this can be, we can do this pretty much anywhere, load balancer, API gateways, microservices, Kubernetes. We're here specifically talking about Cloudflare. So just imagine this as Cloudflare. And so we do this API traffic collection and we're bringing this up, right? We feed this into our AI-powered big data engine, right? That duality that we were talking about previously. And this fully comes up to be our API context engine, or our ACE architecture. And one of our biggest differentiators between us and our competition right now is we're the only ones in the market that has a patent for this. And we're very descriptive of what that patent is: the system and method for identifying and preventing malicious API attacks. And so when we feed that into the actual platform, and the benefits you're going to get is going to be 3 different essential pillars that you'll need to stand on. And we order this in this way because it's the quickest mean time to value. So day 0 is going to be discovery. Discovery. Because the problem is with security, if you don't know something, you can't do anything about it. And then you get potentially breached. And it's this vicious cycle, right? And so what we want to do is cut that and have it, hey, we know about it, we can do something about it, we've done something about it, we're secure. It's a straight line after that. So we give the discovery of all your APIs a nice inventoried list all the way from API endpoint to the actual sensitive data within the request and response, right? And that way you can answer those specific questions around risk and compliance. Are we following our policy? Well, if we don't know about it, how can we even address those questions, right? And as we're doing the discovery, we're baselining all of those user behaviors and understanding what a normalized sequence of API calls ought to look like in order to provide you runtime protection. That's the second pillar, right? Because now that we know everything, we're able to distinguish and show you, right, why someone is a good user, maybe an accidental behavior, anomalous. And then lastly, who's that malicious attacker, right? Who's coming in trying to grab at information they should not have. And then the last piece is going to be the third pillar, shift left activities, right? Giving your developers the tools to push pre-prod APIs to production, hardened and secure. So I'm going to let that sink in for just a second as I take a sip. So that was the salt brain. Now we're going to go through the actual flow of traffic. And I want to direct your attention to the top left here. And this is going to be a reiteration of what I said before, right? It's not in line. We are sitting out of band. Right? And this is going to be automated continuous. And then lastly, environment agnostic. And so whenever we have a client send over API traffic, this is how it's automated and continuous. Whenever they send over the API traffic, we are collecting at these specific points, right? Again, reiterating API gateways, microservices, load balancers, cloud. What we want to specifically look at is the Cloudflare workers, right? And so once we build in that workers, and I'll show the live demo of it, of how we do the integration in a bit. Once we deploy that, it'll send over a mirror of all the API traffic and then send it to the Salt Cloud. Now, something that's a distinguishing factor here is when, I'm sure you're thinking, okay, you're receiving all the request and response, you're getting that sensitive data. We don't want you to have that person's PII. We don't want it either. And so to solve that problem, we have something called a hybrid server. The reason why it says optional here is because it can either sit in your environment or it'll sit in our environment. And what this hybrid server does is strip off and remove any kind of PII or raw data, only sending over the API metadata. Right? And so this is very much mutually beneficial to both of us, right? That way it solves for data residency for yourself, and it answers our policies around risk and compliance. We don't want that information. We don't care about that information. We just want the API metadata so that we can provide you with all these features, right? API discovery, data classification, baselining of hundreds of attributes, attack detection and prevention. And so normally when I get to this point, I think I can hear the questions coming. It's coming through the webcam. Okay, if you're giving that attack detection and then prevention, and you guys sit out of band, how is this even possible? Well, let me show you. With these two easy steps, we have something called an outbound integration, where we'll actually send an API call or a webhook over to your security device, whether it be, obviously we're talking about Cloudflare, so it'll be API call back to Cloudflare to say, hey, block this attacker with this specific correlator, whether it be IP address, a user ID, device ID, something of that nature, so we holistically block the attacker and not just a transaction. And this is why, right, we kept saying in the beginning, this is meant to complement. It's meant to enhance. Right? Because we're not here to rip and replace anything. We're here to augment and make better what's already existing there. Right? So we have to have Cloudflare there. We want Cloudflare to be there. And then on top of that, right, the environment agnostic piece, we want to make sure we're always sitting with what your security posture looks like, right? And so that means alerts and remediation tickets. We have integrations that go out to your SIM, to your alerting system, and then as well as your ticketing system. That way, right, you don't have to change anything. You can live exactly as you are and have an additional tool that's very, very simple and very easy to use within your ecosystem. Awesome. And so next, in order to really talk about kind of how this fits in with Cloudflare, here kind of sits the Cloudflare order of operation, right? DNS, SSL, termination, security suite, workers, cache, et cetera, et cetera. What we're going to hyper focus in on is this piece right here, the security suite and the worker. And so when the client sends over the API traffic, it's going to hit that security suite. It's going to block all that known bad and then send over what's considered the clean traffic. Once it hits that workers, it'll send over the mirrored API request and response traffic via Salt RESTful API over TLS. And then at the Salt security platform, you can go and say, okay, this is bad traffic. We want to block this bad actor. And so we can go ahead and send blocking rules to Cloudflare WAF, whether that be manual or automatically, and it'll go ahead and then block at the security suite. And so then again, what's considered clean traffic comes through. And if we see that again, we're able to block it. We're able to react. And then one last slide before the demo. I appreciate everybody's attention. The Cloudflare and Salt security benefits, right? We went over what the Cloudflare WAF benefits are, right? Amazing. Cloudflare managed rules, rule set, OWASP top 10, rate limiting custom WAF rules. Now add to that the automated API discovery, the sensitive data discovery, security posture insights, knowing that maybe a social security lives in the URL where it shouldn't live, right? Runtime protection, blocking those bad actors, OWASP API top 10 detection and blocking, right? So OWASP, if you don't know about this, OWASP understood that the API is a whole new attack vector, so they made a separate OWASP API top 10 to deal with this and combat it. Then we have things like remediation tickets, where we'll actually send off, say, hey, this is the attacker, this is what they did. Here's actually some suggestions on how to harden your API so they don't get through next time with a 4XX. And that can be shipped over to your developers. So the developers can worry more and have fun with the development portion rather than the security side. Then OAS analysis, and then contextual API testing of pre-prod. Awesome. I really appreciate everybody's attention so far. Next, I'm going to go straight into the demo. And that way you guys can see what it actually looks like to build this out, how quick and easy it is. Perfect. I'll give it just a second to come up. Take a quick sip. Perfect. So we're here at the workers page. The first thing that we're going to do is create a service. And then we're going to go ahead and name this. We'll do best webinar audience ever. We'll keep it as HTTP handler and then hit create service. Alrighty. And then once this is done populating up top right for the quick edit, give it just a moment. We'll be able to enter the code. Hit quick edit. We can go ahead and hit select all, delete that. I got off the screen for just a moment to go ahead and copy and paste the code. Save and deploy. Go ahead and scoot back on over to the actual worker in Holy. We go over to settings, and this is actually going to be the hardest part in the entire workers and deployment, is going to variables, hitting add variable, and then adding each variable that's within the actual worker. I'm not going to do that here because I don't want to bore you with that because it's not fun. So I'm going to actually jump out of here, go to one that's already existing, go to settings and show you what that looks like. An edit variable, and you can see all the variables here, and you have the ability to actually encrypt it as well, which is awesome. So that way, Cloudflare is security focused, and you can tell that they are security forward by being able to encrypt this, so you don't, show any kind of the tokens or anything like that. Awesome. And then one last thing needs to be done. We go to triggers here. We can go ahead and add a route. We'll do Dale.pink. Oops, I don't know how to type apparently. And then hit that with the route, show what zone it's in, and then we can hit add a route there, and that'll trigger that to go right here. And then afterwards, we're able to verify that it is in fact working. Yes, we can see all the success and all that information going through, which is awesome. Perfect. And so I want to show one last thing before we open up the Q&A. Just the Salt security dashboard real quick. And then what this looks like. I just want to give a quick little teaser just on the discovery, right? This is a nice overview. So right when we start accepting that API traffic, you can see all the APIs and endpoint sensor parameters at the top. A lot of different high level of what's going on within the dashboard. And then one thing I just want to show you guys real quick, appreciate your attention, I'll open up, is that just our API inventory. This is the first of 3 layers. You can see where the actual API is. When you go into that, you can see all the endpoints associated to this specific API. And then when you jump into an endpoint at the 3rd layer, we list out in detail the request, showing all the headers, nested arrays, very nice, neat, human readable, beautiful, as well as the payload, right? And so this is what I was talking about, the API metadata. This is all we care about. We just want to be able to show you, hey, this is sensitive data. Email, that's sensitive data. We want to be mindful of that. And then on top of that, with the response, we're going to show you all the different response codes as well and what's within each of those. right? And so again, if you have a 400 and you're responding back with an email address, we might need to change something, right? But as well with the 200s, we can see what's in there and listed. Very nice, neat, pretty. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing there. Thank you guys for your attention. Let's open up to the Q&A. Love to hear some of your questions, be able to answer anything that you might be wondering about, or if I just kind of missed on a topic.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Weston, for that overview. And just to recap for everybody, Weston showed you just how quick this integration is. Many people have multiple elements in their environment. So again, all those things can come into the Salt platform so that that inventory isn't just the inventory of what's flowing through workers, but through gateways, load balancers, other things. So you get that comprehensive look, because that's another big challenge in the world today, is that APIs are getting crafted by different teams in different pockets running through different infrastructure. And even our customers that have pretty sophisticated API governance programs, we're a MuleSoft shop, everything runs through MuleSoft. We always find stuff that actually didn't make it into MuleSoft. So those connectors that Weston walked you through for Cloudflare, again, we can do that in multiple places so that you get a holistic view. And I think that's super useful for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, so we do have a couple of questions in here. And please, all of you, feel free to type in additional questions. You touched on the interaction between Salt and Cloudflare on blocking traffic, but we got a question. And actually, I've heard this from other customers too. It makes a lot of sense. People who think in WAF terms, SQL injection or cross-site scripting, they think in terms of like, I'm going to try an attack, and it either works or it doesn't, right? It's really binary. And
yes.
So if you miss something at first, then you just got hurt, right? Because that attack was kind of a one and done. So there's a question in here, but APIs are different, right? So I think it's a good chance for you to reiterate that. There's a question in here. If Salt has to tell Cloudflare to block, that sounds a bit slow. That sounds reactive. Aren't you already too late?
Yeah, so great question. And just like for a lot of customers we work with, APIs, their environment's kind of a black box. And so when you think of a bad actor going into your environment, they're literally opening up a door to a massive, massive warehouse, shutting behind them, and there's zero light anywhere. It's completely pitch black. So what they need to do in order to figure out the environment is literally touch the ground around you. Okay, I found a chair. Most likely there's a table next to it, right? Because I have context with that. Okay, maybe I'm in, I don't know, where we all drink coffee or something. So just in that same way, the bad actor is trying to understand your environment. So these are very low and slow attacks, right? And they're really not doing a whole lot of bad initially, because it's literally them just trying to see, what happens if I change this one thing? What happens if I change this one thing? What if I manipulate this other thing? And so it's going to be this constant long trek, sometimes days, weeks, even a month to try and figure out what this environment looks like, and then, documenting this out. So, when we think of the known bad, we need to be able to react to that quickly. With this, there's time involved, because there's no way that they can just go straight and understand your environment without, shining a light on specific things to understand, to get that wider context, right? Just as we were saying before, right? Context requires a wider lens, and we have that duality that comes in play. That's the same thing. And so when these attackers come in, it's just low, slow, low, and slow. And so it takes lots of manipulation in order to actually be able to, change and get at one little thing. Great question. I appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, that's a great explanation. We sometimes talk about the fact that API attacks, the fact that they're low and slow, it's a blessing and a curse, right? The curse is your current stack is kind of screwed. They're just not going to see this stuff. But the blessing is you have time. You can get in the way. And actually, side note, our Salt Labs researchers are doing this, like they're doing it in the name of good, not evil. But they're doing this on sites all over the place every day. And when they hit something pretty amazing and they're able to get pretty far and they disclose that vulnerability and then it gets fixed and then we write a report, it's super interesting to me, because they'll write at the end of the report, they'll write up their timeline. I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And you can see they're like days apart. well, I did this and I was able to get this thing. And then a few days later, I did this and I was able to get this thing. And they'll document the security gaps.
Yeah.
And just seeing it spelled out in a timeline, it's so clear. Like, you know, and even a bad actor, they're still going to take their time because they have so much to learn. So great explanation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Jaywan asks another good question here. And again, a popular question. You talked about the duality. You talked about you need a big pool of data, and then you need the smarts to make sense of that data in the AI and the ML and in those algorithms. So this question centers around those algorithms. How do you know when you're learning the traffic, are you learning good traffic or bad traffic?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, we get this one a lot too, because how are we differentiating? And it's really not in the sense of what's good versus what's bad. It's more along the lines of what we're figuring out what's normal versus what's really not normal, because attack traffic won't look normal, right? It's them manipulating what's out of the norm to see what it is they can do, right? The sequence of steps. Remember I talked about the normalization of API calls, what that sequence ought to look like, how quickly or how often they're doing, the amount of data they're getting back, things of that nature, right? That's what we're looking at. We're looking at these kind of baselines that we're building off of and seeing what deters off that and the consistency that deters away from that. So it's a lot of different things that we're looking at in order to determine, hey, this is an attacker, right? Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, that is. I think it's important for people to realize the attack traffic is a tiny percentage. And so just by focusing on what's different and then separating out one-off different versus pattern of different, it makes it easier to, easier. It takes years of algorithm training, but eventually you can get there and see something against. Yeah, exactly. Having been in thousands of environments for 4 years. All right, and then Steve asks another question. I think you touched on this a little bit when you were showing the packet flows, but I think it's a good question. Is Salt having Cloudflare automatically block things, or does a human get involved?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I kind of touched on that with a little bit of both, right? So it's up to you. It's whatever you would like. Being in the security industry for a while now, I always suggest for something like this, especially with a new product, you do it manually first. That way you build the confidence. And then once you understand what it is that Salt is doing, you have that confidence, then we can transfer it automatically. That way, right, you are being more proactive with it rather than being reactive with it. So it's literally just risk tolerance, what your risk appetite is, how much confidence you have. I have confidence in the product now, but it took me time to get there as well, right? Because you have to learn about the product, you have to understand it, understand the data that it is actually looking at, to say, okay, I do trust that Salt is showing the right data. And I think you need to build that confidence with it. And this is just in general, right? Not just for us. This should be in general. You should always be wary when you're considering traffic, whether to block or not, because you don't want to block your good customers, right? But you also want to make sure you're blocking your bad customers.
Yeah, you can't get in the way of legitimate business.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I'll share one quick example. There's a fintech company, Finastra, which is a customer of ours, and there's actually a webinar on this, and he talks about their progression. They are subject to credential stuffing attacks like crazy, but for a while it took them a while to build their trust in us, and so they wanted a human looking at it for a while, and now those attacks are so frequent and they look similar and they trust that Salt's getting it right, and so they've set us up for automatic blocking. But nobody starts there. You're absolutely right. Yeah. All right, we have one more question in here from Sam. I have a workers that already exists for a certain route. What do you do in those cases?
Yeah, so that's what I showed today was a very ideal situation. But with how Cloudflare operates, there's a lot of different really nice configurations that you can do, especially when you apply it to workers. So for something like that situation, we would, as long as you're okay with it, we would work with you to help integrate that into the workers so it is able to touch on that route specifically. So this one would be a case-by-case situation, and we would try and work with you to build that out, because we want to complement and enhance your already existing posture overall, and this would be the case as well. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. I want to be mindful of time with our audience. Weston, thank you so much. Your expertise around Cloudflare and Salt and the combination, showing us what that all looks like coming together. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your participation. Thanks for the great questions. And Weston, thanks again to you for sharing all of your Cloudflare and Salt knowledge. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody, and thank you.